At my daughter's funeral, my son-in-law texted me, "I don't have time to cry that my new girlfriend needs a strong man." That same night, I received a message from my deceased daughter. "Dad, come to the cemetery. Don't let anyone see you." I froze at what I saw. Subscribe to the channel for more stories like this and comment the city you're watching from. I stood at the edge of my daughter's grave, watching them lower the casket into the ground. The October rain had turned the cemetery into a muddy mess, but I barely felt the cold seeping through my black suit. Grace was gone. My little girl, my only child, was gone at 28 years old, and I felt like someone had ripped my heart out and left me standing there empty. The pastor's words floated around me like background noise, something about God's plan, about Grace being in a better place now. I wanted to scream at him that there was no better place for Grace than here, with me, laughing at our Sunday morning pancakes or calling me to complain about her job at the marketing firm. But I just stood there, gripping the single white rose I'd brought her, the same kind I used to buy for her mother's grave every year until cancer took her too. Austin stood beside me, but he might as well have been on another planet. My son-in-law hadn't shed a single tear during the entire service. Not one. He kept checking his phone, shifting his weight from foot to foot like he had somewhere more important to be. When people came up to offer their condolences, he gave them the same rehearsed response. "Thank you for coming. Grace would have appreciated it." But his voice was flat, mechanical, like he was reading lines from a script. I watched him during the pastor's final prayer, and something cold settled in my chest. Austin's eyes weren't focused on the casket. They were scanning the crowd, and when they landed on a young woman with blonde hair standing near the back, something passed between them. A look, a recognition. My stomach twisted, but I told myself I was imagining things. Grief makes you see things that aren't there. After the service, people started drifting away. Grace's co-workers from the marketing firm came up to me, their eyes red with genuine tears. Sarah, her best friend since college, hugged me so tight I thought she might break. "Mr. Morrison, Grace talked about you all the time," Sarah whispered. "She loved you so much. She was so proud of you." I nodded, not trusting my voice. Sarah had been like a second daughter to me, always coming over for holidays when her own family was too busy. But even she seemed different today, nervous. She kept glancing at Austin, and when she thought I wasn't looking, I caught her wiping away fresh tears with shaking hands. "Sarah," I started, but she was already backing away. "I have to go, Mr. Morrison. I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry." And then she was gone, practically running toward the parking lot. Austin appeared at my elbow, straightening his tie. "Well, that's done. The lawyer wants to meet tomorrow about Grace's assets. Simple stuff, really. Everything comes to me as her husband." Assets. He was talking about my daughter's life like she was a business transaction. I stared at him, this man who had been married to Grace for 3 years, who I had welcomed into our family, who used to call me Dad. The man standing next to me felt like a complete stranger. "Austin, maybe we should talk about—" "Actually, Zachary, I need to get going." He was already walking toward his car, a black BMW that Grace had always said made him look pretentious. "I have arrangements to make. You understand?" I didn't understand. I didn't understand any of it. But I was too tired, too empty to fight. I watched him drive away without another word, leaving me standing alone in the cemetery with the rain soaking through my jacket. The drive home was a blur. Our little house felt enormous and suffocating at the same time. Grace's childhood bedroom was exactly the way she'd left it when she moved out after college. Pink walls, stuffed animals on the shelf, photos of her high school friends taped to the mirror. I sat on her bed and buried my face in my hands. That's when my phone buzzed. I almost ignored it. I'd been getting sympathy texts all day, and I wasn't ready to face any more condolences or casserole offers. But something made me look. The message was from Austin. "Don't have time to mourn. My new girlfriend needs a strong man, not someone wallowing in the past. Life goes on, old man." I read it 3 times before it sank in. New girlfriend. He'd buried his wife 6 hours ago and was talking about his new girlfriend. The phone slipped from my hands and clattered to the floor. I felt sick, dizzy, like the room was spinning around me. How long had this been going on? How long had he been cheating on Grace? Had she known? The questions hammered at my skull, but I couldn't make sense of any of it. The Austin I thought I knew would never have sent that message. The Austin I thought I knew had loved my daughter. I was still sitting there in Grace's room when my phone buzzed again. This time, I didn't want to look. I couldn't take another cruel message from Austin. But when I finally picked up the phone, my blood turned to ice. The message was from Grace. Grace's phone number, Grace's contact photo, smiling back at me. But Grace was dead. I had just watched them bury her. My hands were shaking so badly I could barely read the words. Dad, come to the cemetery tonight. 11 o'clock. Park by the old oak tree near the maintenance shed. Don't let anyone see you. Don't tell anyone. Please, Dad, I need you to trust me one more time. The phone slipped from my hands again, and this time I didn't pick it up. I sat there staring at it like it was a snake that might bite me. This wasn't possible. This couldn't be happening. People don't send messages from beyond the grave. There had to be an explanation. Someone was playing a sick joke. Maybe Austin trying to mess with my head even more. But what if it wasn't a joke? What if somehow, impossibly, Grace needed me? I looked at the clock on her nightstand. 8:30. 2.5 hours until 11. 2.5 hours to decide if I was losing my mind or if my daughter was, somehow, impossibly trying to reach me from wherever she was. The rational part of my brain told me to ignore it, to call the police, to report someone for harassment. But the father in me, the part that would have moved mountains for Grace, couldn't let it go. I picked up the phone and read the message again. The oak tree by the maintenance shed. I knew that spot. Grace and I used to go there when she was little, when her mother was having her bad days during chemo. We'd sit under that tree, and I'd tell her stories about brave princesses who saved themselves. As I sat there in Grace's childhood room, surrounded by the ghosts of her laughter, I made a decision that would change everything. I was going to that cemetery, because even if it killed me, even if it meant I was losing my mind, I couldn't ignore the possibility that Grace needed me one last time. I sat in my car outside Greenwood Cemetery at 10:50, my hands gripping the steering wheel so tight my knuckles had gone white. The place looked different at night. During the day it was peaceful, almost serene with its rolling hills and ancient trees, but now under the pale moonlight every shadow seemed to hide something sinister. The wrought iron gates stood open, like a mouth, waiting to swallow me whole. My rational mind kept screaming that this was insane. 65-year-old men didn't meet their dead daughters in cemeteries at midnight. But my heart, the part of me that had raised Grace from a baby, that had held her when she cried over her first heartbreak, that had walked her down the aisle to marry Austin 3 years ago, wouldn't let me drive away. I'd brought a flashlight, though I wasn't sure why. Maybe because the thought of stumbling around Grace's grave in the dark felt too much like a horror movie. My hands were shaking as I got out of the car, and I had to take several deep breaths before I could make my legs move toward the oak tree. The cemetery was completely silent, except for the crunch of fallen leaves under my feet. Even the highway noise seemed muffled here, like the dead demanded their quiet. I found the old oak tree easily enough. Grace and I had carved her initials into it when she was 10, right after her mother died. GM for Grace Morrison, though it would have been GC now. Grace Cooper. Austin had insisted she take his name. I stood under the tree feeling foolish and terrified in equal measure. 11 o'clock came and went. Nothing happened. Of course nothing happened. Dead people don't send text messages, and they certainly don't arrange midnight meetings. I was about to leave when I heard it. A soft scraping sound, like metal against stone. I turned toward Grace's grave, which was maybe 50 feet away. The fresh dirt was still mounded over it, covered with the flowers people had left during the service. But something was different. There was a shape on top of the grave that hadn't been there before, something small and rectangular. My heart was pounding so hard I thought it might burst as I walked over. It was a small wooden box, the kind Grace used to keep her treasures in when she was a child. Her name was carved into the lid in the same careful script she'd used for her school projects. Inside the box, wrapped in plastic to protect it from the moisture, was a letter. My name was written on the envelope in Grace's familiar handwriting, With trembling fingers, I opened it. Dad, if you're reading this, then Austin hasn't found this box yet, and you got my message. I know this seems impossible, but I need you to listen to me and trust me the way you always have. I'm not dead, Dad. I'm hurt and I'm scared, but I'm not dead. Austin tried to kill me 3 nights ago. I had to stop reading. The words blurred together as tears filled my eyes. Not dead. Grace wasn't dead, but that was impossible. I had seen her body. I had identified her at the morgue. I had watched them lower her casket into the ground just hours ago. I forced myself to keep reading. I know this is confusing, and I know it sounds crazy, but I've been planning this for months. Austin has been hitting me, Dad. He's been hurting me for over a year, and it was getting worse. He threatened to kill me if I ever tried to leave him, and I knew he meant it. He said he'd make it look like an accident, like an overdose. He said no one would believe you if you tried to tell them otherwise, because everyone thinks he's such a perfect husband. My hands were shaking so badly I could barely hold the letter. Austin had been hitting her? My Grace? How had I not seen it? How had I not known? I couldn't come to you, Dad, because I knew you'd try to confront him, and I was terrified he'd hurt you too. So I made a plan. Do you remember Dr. Peterson, Mom's oncologist? He's been helping me. 3 months ago, I told him everything, and he agreed to help me disappear. There's a drug that can slow your heartbeat and breathing so much that you appear dead. But it's reversible if you know what you're doing. Dr. Peterson, I remembered him. A kind man who had held my hand when we lost Grace's mother. He had always had a soft spot for Grace, treating her like his own daughter during those terrible months of chemo and radiation. The night Austin tried to strangle me, I managed to inject myself with the drug Dr. Peterson had given me. Austin thought he'd killed me, just like he planned. He called 911, played the devastated husband perfectly, but Dr. Peterson was the one who pronounced me dead at the hospital. He's the one who handled everything afterward. The body they buried today isn't me, Dad. It's someone who died of natural causes, someone whose family couldn't afford a funeral. Dr. Peterson arranged it all. I sank down onto a nearby bench, the letter clutched in my hands. This was impossible. This was like something out of a movie. But as I kept reading, the details made a horrible kind of sense. I've been hiding in Dr. Peterson's cabin upstate, recovering from what Austin did to me. I've broken ribs and a concussion, but I'm alive. I'm alive, Dad, and I'm so sorry I had to put you through this. I know how much it must have hurt to think you'd lost me, but it was the only way to get away from him safely. I thought about Austin's behavior at the funeral, his coldness, his complete lack of grief, the way he'd rushed off afterward, the cruel message about his new girlfriend. It all made sense now. He thought he'd gotten away with murder. There's more, Dad. Austin isn't just abusive. He's been stealing money from his company, using my name to open credit cards, taking out loans against our house. He was planning to kill me and disappear with everything. But I have proof. I have recordings of him hitting me, photos of my injuries, bank statements showing the stolen money. I documented everything, Dad, just like you taught me to do when Mom was sick and we had to fight the insurance company. Grace had always been smart, always thinking ahead. Even as a little girl, she'd been the one to remember to pack extra snacks for long car trips, to double-check that we'd turned off the stove before leaving the house. I should have known she wouldn't just accept being a victim. I need to see you, Dad, but it has to be safe. Austin can't know I'm alive until I'm ready to expose him. Can you meet me tomorrow night? Same place, same time? I'll explain everything then. I love you, Dad. I'm so sorry for what I've put you through, but I couldn't see any other way. The letter was signed with a shaky G and a small heart, the same way she'd signed cards to me since she was 5 years old. I sat there under the oak tree, surrounded by the silence of the dead, and cried harder than I had since her mother died. Grace was alive. My daughter was alive. But she was hurt, scared, in hiding from the man who had tried to murder her, the man I had welcomed into our family, the man who had stood beside me at her funeral and complained about having to mourn. I looked at my watch. It was almost midnight. I carefully folded the letter and put it back in the box, then buried the box under the loose dirt at the base of the oak tree, just like Grace had probably done with the first one. As I walked back to my car, my mind was racing. Tomorrow night, I would see my daughter again. I would hold her and tell her how sorry I was that I hadn't protected her. But first, I had to figure out how to get through the next 24 hours without giving anything away. Austin thought he'd committed the perfect crime. He had no idea that Grace was 10 steps ahead of him, or that his nightmare was just beginning. Because if Austin thought he could hurt my daughter and get away with it, he was about to learn exactly what kind of mistake he'd made. I drove home through the empty streets, and for the first time since I'd gotten that devastating phone call 3 days ago, I felt something other than grief. I felt hope, and underneath that hope, burning quiet and steady, I felt the first stirrings of a rage that would have terrified Austin if he'd known what was coming. The next day dragged by like torture. I couldn't concentrate on anything, couldn't eat, couldn't even pretend to watch television. Every time I looked at the clock, it seemed like the hands had barely moved. I kept thinking about Grace's letter, about the impossible reality that my daughter was alive, but hurt and hiding. Austin called me around noon. His voice was different from the day before. Warmer, more like the man I thought I knew. "Hey, Zachary, I wanted to apologize for yesterday. I know I seemed distant at the funeral. I'm just processing everything differently, you know? Some people cry, some people shut down. I'm a shut-down kind of guy." I gripped the phone, trying to keep my voice steady. "It's okay, Austin. We all grieve differently. I was thinking maybe we could have dinner sometime this week. Talk about Grace, share some memories. I know she'd want us to stay close." The audacity of it made my stomach turn. He was playing the grieving widower, probably practicing for his new girlfriend. "Sure, Austin, that sounds nice." "Great. Oh, and the lawyer wants to meet Friday about Grace's life insurance. It's a decent amount, $25,000. Should help with some of the funeral expenses." $25,000. Austin was already counting Grace's money from a life insurance policy he probably helped her apply for. I wondered if he'd increased the amount recently, planning ahead for his payday. After I hung up, I couldn't sit still anymore. I drove to the cemetery, not to the oak tree, but to Grace's grave. I stood there looking at the fresh flowers, the headstone that read, "Grace Cooper, beloved wife and daughter," and felt a strange mix of relief and fury. Beloved wife. Austin had probably picked those words himself. I noticed something I'd missed the day before. Some of the flowers were wilted, but others looked fresh. Too fresh for flowers that had been sitting out since yesterday morning. Someone had been here recently, replacing the old ones with new ones. I bent down and found a small card tucked between 2 bouquets of white roses. "For my brave girl, love always, Dr. P." Dr. Peterson, he was taking care of Grace, making sure her fake grave looked tended. I pocketed the card and looked around, wondering if he was watching from somewhere nearby. That evening, I was back at the oak tree by 10:45. This time, I didn't have to wait long. At exactly 11 o'clock, I heard footsteps on the gravel path. My heart stopped when I saw the figure walking toward me. It was Grace. She was thinner than I remembered, moving carefully like every step hurt. Her left arm was in a sling, and I could see the shadow of bruises on her face even in the moonlight. But it was definitely my daughter, alive and breathing, and walking toward me. "Dad," she whispered. And then she was in my arms, careful of her injuries, but holding me as tight as she could. I couldn't speak. I just held her and cried, feeling her heartbeat against my chest, breathing in the familiar scent of her shampoo. She was real. She was alive. My little girl was alive. "I'm so sorry, Dad," she whispered into my shoulder. "I'm so sorry I had to put you through that." "Don't apologize," I managed to say. "Don't you dare apologize. You did what you had to do to survive." We sat down on the bench under the oak tree, and Grace told me everything. The story that came out was worse than anything I could have imagined. "It started about 18 months ago," she said, her voice quiet but steady. "Austin lost a lot of money gambling. I didn't know about it at first, but he'd been betting on sports, playing poker online, losing thousands of dollars. When I found out, I told him we needed to get help, maybe see a counselor about gambling addiction." She touched the bruises on her face unconsciously. "That's when he hit me the first time. Said it was my fault for not being supportive enough. He apologized afterward, bought me flowers, said it would never happen again. You know how that story goes." I did know. I'd seen enough movies, read enough articles about domestic violence, but I'd never imagined it happening to my daughter. Grace was smart, strong, independent. How had I not seen the signs? He started controlling everything, Grace continued. My bank accounts, my phone, who I could see. He made me quit my job at the marketing firm, said he made enough money for both of us. But he wasn't making money, Dad. He was stealing it. From where? His company, Morrison and Associates. Ironic name, right? He gave me a bitter smile. Austin's been embezzling from client accounts for over a year. Small amounts at first, but then bigger chunks when his gambling debts got worse. He's stolen almost $60,000 so far. $60,000. I felt sick thinking about it. Austin worked at a small accounting firm. That kind of theft would destroy the company if it came out. But that wasn't enough, Grace went on. He took out credit cards in my name without telling me, forged my signature on loan applications. By the time I figured out what was happening, we owed almost $40,000 on cards I'd never even seen. Grace, why didn't you come to me? Why didn't you tell me what was happening? She looked down at her hands and I could see the shame she was carrying. Because he said he'd kill you if I told anyone. He showed me pictures of you, Dad. Pictures of you leaving the house, going to the grocery store, working in the garden. He said accidents happen to old men all the time, and nobody would think twice about it. The words hit me like a physical blow. Austin had threatened to kill me to keep Grace quiet. My son-in-law, the man I'd taught to drive a stick shift, the man who used to help me fix things around the house, had planned to murder me if Grace tried to leave him. 3 weeks ago, things got worse, Grace said. Austin found out that his company was planning an audit. He knew they'd discover the missing money, so he needed an exit strategy. That's when he started talking about my life insurance policy. The $25,000 policy. Grace shook her head. That's the old one, Dad. Austin convinced me to increase it 6 months ago. He said it was responsible financial planning for married couples. The new policy is for $200,000. $200,000. Austin hadn't just been planning to kill Grace to shut her up. He'd been planning to cash in on her death. He started getting sloppy, talking about what he'd do with the money after I was gone, said he'd pay off his debts and start fresh somewhere else. Maybe California, where nobody knew him. He even talked about the woman he'd been seeing on the side, how they could finally be together once his obligation to me was over, the new girlfriend. Austin had already been planning his new life while he was plotting to murder my daughter. That's when I knew I had to do something drastic, Grace said. I couldn't just leave because he'd find me and kill me. I couldn't go to the police because I didn't have enough proof yet. And Austin's company handles accounts for half the police department. He has connections everywhere. So you decided to fake your own death. Dr. Peterson came up with the idea, actually. He said there was a drug that could simulate death closely enough to fool an autopsy if the examiner wasn't looking for it. But it had to be done perfectly. One mistake, and Austin would know I was alive. Grace explained how they'd planned everything. Dr. Peterson had arranged for the body of a homeless woman who died of natural causes, someone with no family to claim her. Grace had switched her dental records at Dr. Peterson's office months earlier. When Austin strangled her that night, Grace had managed to inject herself with the drug before she lost consciousness. Austin thought he'd killed me, she said. He called 911, played the devastated husband. But Dr. Peterson was on call that night at the emergency room. He's the one who pronounced me dead, who handled the body. He made sure no one else got too close. And the autopsy? Dr. Peterson has a friend at the coroner's office. Someone who owes him favors from medical school. They wrote up a report saying I died of a drug overdose, made it look like an accident. Austin probably thinks he's the luckiest man alive right now. I shook my head, amazed at the complexity of what they'd pulled off. And now? Now we wait, Grace said. I've been documenting everything for months. I have recordings of Austin admitting to the embezzlement, photos of my injuries, bank statements showing the stolen money. I even have video of him hitting me from a hidden camera Dr. Peterson helped me set up. She pulled a small device from her pocket, something that looked like a USB drive. Everything's on here, Dad. Enough evidence to put Austin away for 20 years, but I needed to make sure he couldn't hurt you or anyone else before I turned it in. When? Soon. Dr. Peterson says I need another week to heal enough to testify, And we want to catch Austin when he tries to collect the life insurance money. That'll be the final piece of evidence we need." We sat in silence for a moment, and I felt a mix of pride and heartbreak for my daughter. She'd been through hell, but she'd been smart enough and brave enough to find a way out, just like her mother would have done. "There's something else, Dad," Grace said quietly. "Something I haven't told you yet." I braced myself for more bad news, but Grace was smiling for the first time since I'd seen her. "Austin doesn't know, but I've been in contact with the FBI. They've been investigating his company for months, looking into some suspicious transactions. When I told them what I knew, they offered me protection in exchange for my testimony." The FBI. This was bigger than just Austin's gambling debts and domestic violence. This was a federal case. Austin thinks he won, Dad. He thinks he killed me and got away with it. He has no idea that his whole world is about to come crashing down. As Grace told me the final details of her plan, I realized that my daughter hadn't just survived Austin's attempt to murder her, she'd turned it into the very weapon that would destroy him. And in less than a week, Austin would discover that trying to kill Grace Morrison had been the biggest mistake of his life. The next 3 days were the longest of my life. I had to act normal around Austin while knowing he was a murderer who thought he'd gotten away with killing my daughter. Every time he called to check on me or stopped by the house, I had to resist the urge to grab him by the throat and demand answers. He came over Tuesday evening with Chinese takeout, playing the concerned son-in-law perfectly. "I thought you might not be eating much," he said, unpacking containers of lo mein and sweet and sour chicken. "Grace always worried about you living alone." The way he said her name, so casual and caring, made my skin crawl. This man had strangled my daughter 3 nights before her fake funeral, and now he was sitting at my kitchen table, talking about her like she was just a fond memory. "You're very thoughtful, Austin," I managed to say. "Grace would want us to take care of each other," he said, digging into his food. "She was always talking about family being the most important thing." I watched him eat. This man who had beaten and terrorized my daughter for 18 months. He looked so normal, so ordinary. Medium height, brown hair starting to thin at the crown, wire-rimmed glasses that made him look responsible and trustworthy. If you saw him at the grocery store, you'd think he was just another suburban husband picking up milk and bread. "I've been thinking about what Grace would want me to do with her things," he said between bites. "I know it's early, but maybe you'd like to go through some of them with me this weekend. Take whatever you want to keep." Her things. He was already planning to get rid of Grace's belongings, probably to make room for his new girlfriend. I wondered if he'd kept anything at all, or if he just saw dollar signs when he looked at her jewelry and clothes. "That's very considerate," I said, though the words tasted like poison. Austin pulled out his phone and showed me a photo. "This is Madison, by the way. I know it seems fast, but Grace always said she wanted me to be happy if anything happened to her." Madison was young, maybe 25, with long blonde hair and the kind of smile that looked practiced. She was pretty in a generic way, like a stock photo model. I wondered if she knew she was dating a murderer, or if Austin was just as good at fooling her as he'd been at fooling me. "She seems lovely," I lied. "She's been very supportive during this difficult time," Austin said, putting his phone away. "Grace would have liked her." The audacity of it took my breath away. Grace would have liked the woman Austin was cheating with while he planned to kill her. I had to excuse myself to the bathroom before I said something that would give everything away. Wednesday was even worse. Austin called me at work to ask if I wanted to have lunch, said he had good news to share. We met at a diner downtown, the same place Grace and I used to go for pancakes when she was little. "The insurance company approved Grace's claim," he said, cutting into his burger like he was discussing the weather. $200,000. Can you believe it? Grace was so smart to increase that policy when she did. Smart. Grace had been smart, all right. Smart enough to know Austin was planning to kill her and use the insurance money to fund his escape. Smart enough to turn his own plan against him. "That's wonderful, Austin," I said, my coffee growing cold in my hands. "Madison and I are thinking about taking a trip to celebrate Grace's life," he went on. "Maybe Hawaii or Europe. Grace always wanted to see Paris, but we never got the chance. I feel like I should experience it for both of us, you know? He was going to take his new girlfriend to Paris on my daughter's life insurance money he'd only collected because he thought he'd murdered her. I gripped my coffee cup so tight I thought it might shatter. I'm sure Grace would want you to be happy, I said, the lie burning my throat. Thursday morning, I got a text from Grace telling me to meet her at a different location. Not the cemetery this time, but an old abandoned gas station about 10 miles out of town. She was there when I arrived, sitting in Dr. Peterson's car with the engine running. "Change of plans, Dad," she said when I got into the passenger seat. "Austin filed the insurance claim yesterday. That means we can move forward sooner than we thought." Dr. Peterson was in the driver's seat, a thin man in his 60s with kind eyes behind wire-rimmed glasses. He'd aged since I'd last seen him during my wife's treatment, but he still had the same gentle manner that had made Grace trust him with her desperate plan. "Mr. Morrison," he said, shaking my hand, "I wish we were meeting under better circumstances, but I'm glad Grace felt she could trust me to help her." "Thank you," I said, and meant it. "Thank you for saving my daughter's life." Grace showed me a thick folder full of documents, photos of her bruises, bank statements showing Austin's theft, recordings of him threatening her. The evidence was overwhelming, damning, but the most chilling piece was a video recording from a hidden camera in their bedroom. I could only watch a few seconds of it. Austin hitting Grace, screaming at her about money, about how stupid she was, about how no one would miss her when she was gone. Grace had documented her own abuse, knowing she'd need proof if she was going to survive. "The FBI is ready to move," she said. "Agent Martinez has been coordinating with the local police. They're going to arrest Austin tomorrow when he goes to collect the insurance check." "Tomorrow?" Austin made an appointment with his insurance agent for Friday afternoon. He thinks he's going to walk out of there with a check for $200,000. Instead, he's going to walk into a trap. Dr. Peterson handed me another folder. "These are copies of everything in case something goes wrong. The FBI wanted to make sure someone else had the evidence, someone Austin wouldn't suspect." I looked through the papers, seeing the full scope of what Grace had endured and documented. There were medical records from Dr. Peterson showing her injuries, photos of her beaten face that she'd taken in secret, even recordings of Austin talking to his bookie about his gambling debts. "There's more," Grace said quietly. "The FBI investigation uncovered something else. Austin isn't the only one at his company who's been stealing. His boss, Mr. Hendricks, has been embezzling money for years. Austin figured it out and started blackmailing him, which is how he got away with his own theft for so long." "Blackmail?" "Austin told Hendricks he'd expose the embezzlement unless Hendricks covered for him. It's all in the recordings. Austin was stupid enough to brag about it to Madison, thinking he was impressing her with how clever he was." Grace pulled out her phone and played a snippet of audio. Austin's voice, clear as day. "The old man has no idea I know about his Cayman Islands account. As long as I keep quiet. He keeps quiet about my little withdrawals. It's beautiful, really. Honor among thieves." "The FBI thinks Hendricks has stolen over $500,000 from client accounts," Grace continued. "When Austin goes down, he's taking Hendricks with him. The whole company is going to collapse." I thought about all the innocent people who would lose their jobs when Morrison and Associates went under. Then I thought about Grace's bruised face in those photos, and I stopped feeling sorry for anyone except the victims. "What happens to you after tomorrow?" I asked. "I'll have to testify at the trial, but the FBI has offered me witness protection until then. After that," she shrugged, "I get to start over. New name, new identity, new life. It's not ideal, but it's better than being dead." The thought of losing Grace again, even to witness protection, made my chest tight. But she was right. Starting over was better than the alternative Austin had planned for her. "There's something else you need to know, Dad," Grace said, her voice getting softer. "When Austin gets arrested tomorrow, he's going to be angry, desperate. The FBI thinks he might try to blame you somehow, claim you were involved in helping me fake my death." "Me?" "Think about it from his perspective. His dead wife turns out to be alive, and her father just happens to have been acting normal around him all week. He might think you've known all along." Dr. Peterson nodded. "Agent Martinez wanted us to warn you. Austin might try to drag you down with him, claim you were part of some conspiracy to frame him. You need to be ready for that." I thought about it for a moment. Austin would be cornered, facing 20 years in prison for embezzlement, domestic violence, and attempted murder. Desperate people did desperate things. What should I do? "Stay away from him," Grace said. "Don't answer his calls. Don't go to his house. Let the FBI handle everything. If he tries to contact you, call Agent Martinez immediately." She handed me a business card with a phone number written on it. "This is Agent Martinez's direct line. She knows you might need to reach her quickly." We sat in the car for another hour, going over the details of what would happen the next day. Austin would go to his insurance appointment at 2 o'clock. The FBI would be waiting. Grace would appear at the police station at the same time, officially coming back from the dead to file charges against her husband. "Are you scared?" I asked her. Grace considered the question seriously. "I'm nervous about testifying, about facing him in court, but scared? No, Dad. I'm not scared anymore. Austin took everything from me for 18 months. My job, my friends, my freedom, my sense of safety. He tried to take my life, but he didn't succeed, and now he's going to pay for every single thing he did to me." As we prepared to leave, Grace hugged me one more time. "After tomorrow, everything changes," she said. "Austin will know I'm alive, and our secret will be out. But we did it, Dad. We beat him." Driving home, I felt a mixture of anticipation and dread. Tomorrow, Austin would discover that killing Grace had been impossible, and trying to kill her had been his downfall. Tomorrow, my daughter would officially come back from the dead to destroy the man who had tried to murder her. And tomorrow, I would finally get to stop pretending that I didn't know my son-in-law was a monster who deserved everything that was coming to him. Friday morning crawled by like a wounded animal. I couldn't concentrate on anything, couldn't sit still, couldn't stop checking the clock every 5 minutes. At 2 o'clock, Austin would walk into his insurance appointment expecting to collect $200,000 for murdering my daughter. Instead, he'd find FBI agents waiting to arrest him for embezzlement, domestic violence, and attempted murder. I tried to keep busy, but everything felt surreal. I made coffee and forgot to drink it. I started reading the newspaper and realized I'd read the same paragraph 4 times without absorbing a word. I kept thinking about Grace, somewhere safe with Dr. Peterson and Agent Martinez, preparing to officially come back from the dead. At 1:30, my phone rang. Austin's name appeared on the screen, and my heart jumped into my throat. I almost didn't answer, but I was afraid that ignoring him might seem suspicious. "Hey, Zachary," Austin said, and something in his voice was different, tighter, more controlled. "I was wondering if you wanted to grab dinner tonight, celebrate Grace's life with a nice meal, my treat." "That sounds nice, Austin," I managed to say. "Great. How about that steakhouse on 5th Street, the one Grace loved? 7 o'clock? Grace had never liked that steakhouse. She thought it was pretentious and overpriced. But I couldn't correct him without revealing that I'd been talking to her. "Perfect," I said. "Oh, and Zachary, don't mention this to anyone else, okay? I want it to be just us, a private memorial." The way he said it made my skin crawl. There was something underneath his words, something that sounded almost like a threat. I hung up and immediately called Agent Martinez. "Mr. Morrison," her voice was crisp, professional. "Is everything all right? Austin just called me. He wants to have dinner tonight. Something feels wrong about it." There was a pause. "Mr. Morrison, I need you to listen to me carefully. We attempted to arrest Austin at his insurance appointment, but he never showed up. We think he may have been tipped off somehow." My blood turned to ice. "What do you mean he never showed up?" "His appointment was at 2 o'clock. We had agents positioned at the insurance office and outside in unmarked cars. Austin never arrived. We went to his house, but it's empty. Looks like he cleared out in a hurry." I sank into my kitchen chair, my legs suddenly too weak to support me. "He knows. Somehow he knows Grace is alive. We're not sure how much he knows, but we have to assume he's dangerous now. Mr. Morrison, I need you to pack a bag and come to the police station immediately. We're going to put you in protective custody until we find him." "What about Grace?" "She's safe. She's already in a secure location with Dr. Peterson. But Austin might try to use you to get to her. We can't take that risk." I was throwing clothes into a suitcase when I heard a car pull into my driveway. Through the bedroom window, I could see Austin's black BMW. He was just sitting there, engine running, staring at my house. I called Agent Martinez back, whispering into the phone. "He's here. He's outside my house right now. Don't answer the door. We have units en route, but they're 15 minutes away. Stay on the line with me and get to the back of the house." I crept toward the living room window and peered through the curtains. Austin was getting out of his car, moving slowly, deliberately. He wasn't wearing his usual business clothes. Instead, he had on dark jeans and a black jacket, and there was something in his right hand that made my stomach lurch. A gun. "He has a weapon," I whispered into the phone. "Mr. Morrison, I need you to get to your back door right now. Is there somewhere you can go? A neighbor's house?" I thought about Mrs. Chen next door, a sweet elderly woman who didn't deserve to get caught up in this nightmare. I can't put my neighbors at risk. Austin was walking up my front walkway now, the gun held low against his leg. His face was calm, almost peaceful, but his eyes looked dead. This wasn't the Austin I thought I knew, the charming son-in-law who helped me fix my gutters and remembered my birthday. This was someone else entirely. The doorbell rang. "Zachary," Austin's voice carried through the door, still using that friendly tone. "I know you're in there. Your car's in the driveway. Can we talk?" I held my breath, pressing myself against the wall beside the front door. "I had an interesting afternoon," Austin continued, his voice getting louder. "Went to pick up Grace's insurance money, but the strangest thing happened. There were FBI agents waiting for me instead of a check. Isn't that weird?" The doorknob rattled. Austin was testing to see if the door was locked. "They told me some fascinating stories, Zachary. Stories about embezzlement and domestic violence and attempted murder. But the most interesting story was about Grace. Apparently, my dead wife isn't as dead as we thought." I closed my eyes, my heart pounding so hard I was sure Austin could hear it through the door. "Now, I'm trying to figure out how that's possible," Austin went on, his voice taking on a sing-song quality that was absolutely terrifying. "How does a dead woman suddenly become undead? It's like a magic trick, isn't it? But magic tricks need accomplices." Something crashed against the front door. Austin was trying to break it down. "Where is she?" he screamed, and all pretense of civility vanished from his voice. "I know you know where she is." I ran toward the back door, but I could hear wood splintering behind me. Austin was bigger than me, stronger, and he had a gun. Even if I made it outside, he could catch me easily. Instead, I ducked into the basement, pulling out my phone to whisper my location to Agent Martinez. "He's breaking down the front door. I'm in the basement. Stay hidden. Units are 8 minutes out." 8 minutes felt like 8 hours. I could hear Austin moving around upstairs, his footsteps heavy and deliberate. He was searching the house room by room. "Zachary," he called out, his voice echoing through the house. "I know you helped her. Nobody could have planned this alone. Grace was always too stupid to think ahead." A wave of rage washed over me. Even now, even while hunting me with a gun, Austin couldn't resist insulting my daughter. Grace, who had outsmarted him at every turn, who had documented his crimes while he was beating her, who had faked her own death to escape him. "She was never stupid," I said before I could stop myself. The footsteps above me stopped. "There you are," Austin said, and I could hear the smile in his voice. "I was wondering when you'd speak up." Heavy footsteps moved toward the basement door. I looked around desperately for another way out, but there wasn't one. I was trapped. "You know what I find most insulting about this whole situation?" Austin said as he started down the basement stairs. "You actually thought you could outsmart me? You and Grace and that bleeding heart doctor. Did you really think I wouldn't figure it out?" He appeared at the bottom of the stairs, the gun pointed directly at me. Up close, I could see that his hands were shaking slightly, and there was sweat beading on his forehead despite the cool weather. "Here's what's going to happen," Austin said, his voice deadly calm now. "You're going to call Grace and tell her to meet us somewhere private, and then we're going to finish what should have been finished 3 weeks ago." "I don't know where she is," Austin laughed, a sound with no humor in it. "Right, your daughter fakes her own death, frames me for murder, and you just happen to be completely innocent in all of this. Try again." "Austin, you need to think about what you're doing. The FBI knows you're here. They're probably surrounding the house right now." "Then we better hurry," he said, gesturing with the gun toward the stairs. Move. As I walked up the basement stairs with Austin behind me, I prayed that Agent Martinez was right about backup, being close. But even if they arrived in time to save me, I knew this wasn't over. Austin was beyond rational thought now, consumed by rage and desperation. He'd lost everything, and the only thing left for him was revenge. We reached the living room, and Austin motioned for me to sit in my recliner. He stood across from me, the gun trained on my chest, his finger resting on the trigger. "Call her," he said. "I told you, I don't know where." The gun went off. The bullet shattered the lamp beside my chair, sending glass flying across the room. The sound was deafening in the enclosed space, and my ears were ringing as Austin pointed the gun at me again. "That was a warning shot," he said. "The next one goes through your kneecap, then your elbow, then your shoulder. We can do this the easy way or the hard way, but either way you're going to call Grace." I looked into Austin's eyes and saw nothing there but madness. This man had beaten my daughter for 18 months, tried to strangle her to death, and now he was willing to torture and kill me to get to her. There was no reasoning with him, no appealing to whatever humanity he might have once had. But I also knew that Grace was safe, protected by the FBI, and that Austin's reign of terror was almost over. All I had to do was survive long enough for the cavalry to arrive. "Okay," I said, reaching slowly for my phone. "I'll call her." Austin smiled, and it was the most frightening thing I'd ever seen. I held my phone with trembling hands, trying to buy time while Austin stood over me with the gun pointed at my chest. My ears were still ringing from the warning shot, and I could smell gunpowder in the air. "Call her," Austin repeated, his voice tight with barely controlled rage. I started to dial, but before I could finish, the sound of screeching tires filled the air outside. Austin's head snapped toward the window, his face going pale as he saw the black SUVs pulling into my driveway. "FBI, come out with your hands up!" The voice boomed through a megaphone, and Austin's expression shifted from rage to panic. He grabbed me by the shirt, hauling me to my feet and pressing the gun against my temple. "This is your fault," he snarled. "You and Grace think you're so smart, but you have no idea what you've done." Through the front window, I could see FBI agents taking positions behind their vehicles, weapons drawn. Agent Martinez was speaking into a megaphone, her voice calm and professional. "Austin Cooper, this is Agent Martinez with the FBI. We have the house surrounded. Release Mr. Morrison and come out with your hands up." Austin dragged me toward the back of the house, away from the windows. "There has to be another way out," he muttered, more to himself than to me. "The back door, maybe the basement." "Austin, it's over," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "Grace is safe. The evidence is already with the FBI. You can't change any of that now." "Shut up!" He pressed the gun harder against my head. "This isn't over until I say it's over. Grace destroyed my life, and I'm going to destroy hers." We reached the kitchen, and Austin peered out the back window. More agents were positioned in the yard, cutting off any escape route. He was trapped, and he knew it. That's when my phone rang. Austin looked at the screen, and his eyes went wide. "Grace," he breathed, reading her name on the caller ID. "She's calling you." "Don't answer it," I said quickly. But Austin snatched the phone from my hand and hit the accept button. "Hello, sweetheart," he said, his voice dripping with venom. "Miss me?" I couldn't hear Grace's side of the conversation, but I could see Austin's face changing as she spoke. His smug expression slowly shifted to confusion, then to fear. "What do you mean you can see me?" he said into the phone. Austin spun around, looking frantically through the windows. That's when I saw her. Grace was standing beside one of the FBI vehicles, wearing a bulletproof vest and holding a phone to her ear. Even from this distance, I could see that she was no longer the broken, beaten woman who had hidden in Dr. Peterson's cabin. She stood tall, confident, surrounded by federal agents who were there to protect her. "Surprise, Austin," Grace said, her voice coming through the phone speaker. "Did you really think I was going to hide forever?" Austin's face went red with rage. "You little—" "I can hear everything you're saying to my father," Grace interrupted. "Agent Martinez is recording this call. Every threat you make is just more evidence for your trial." "There won't be a trial," Austin screamed into the phone. "I'll kill him. I'll kill your precious daddy, and then I'll find you and finish what I started." "No, Austin," Grace said, and her voice was ice cold. "You won't. Because you're not the smart one in this relationship. You never were." While you were beating me and stealing money and planning my murder, I was 10 steps ahead of you." Austin was shaking now, the gun wavering in his hand. "I should have killed you properly the first time, but you didn't. And that was your biggest mistake." Through the kitchen window, I could see Grace handing her phone to Agent Martinez and putting on a headset. Her voice now came through the megaphone outside. "Austin, you have 30 seconds to release my father and surrender. If you don't, the agents are going to come in and take you by force." "Grace, don't," I started to say, but Austin cut me off by pressing the gun harder against my head. "She's bluffing," he said, but his voice was shaking. "She won't risk your life." 20 seconds, Austin. I could see the FBI agents moving closer to the house, their weapons ready. Austin was breathing hard, sweat pouring down his face as he realized he was out of options. 15 seconds. "I can still kill him," Austin shouted toward the window. "I can still take something from you." 10 seconds. Austin looked at me, and for a moment I saw something almost human in his eyes. Fear, desperation, the realization that his life as he knew it was over. 5 seconds. And then something in Austin seemed to break. The gun dropped away from my head and he sank to his knees on the kitchen floor. The weapon clattered across the tiles, coming to rest near the refrigerator. "I can't," he whispered. "I can't do it anymore." The front door exploded inward as FBI agents stormed the house. "Get down! Get down! Hands where we can see them!" Austin was already on the ground, his hands over his head, sobbing like a child. 2 agents grabbed him and zip-tied his wrist behind his back, while another kicked the gun away. Agent Martinez appeared in the kitchen, her weapon drawn but pointed at the floor. "Mr. Morrison, are you hurt?" I shook my head, not trusting my voice. My legs felt like rubber, and I had to grab the kitchen counter to keep from falling. And then Grace was there, pushing past the agents to wrap her arms around me. She was real, solid, alive, and for the second time in a week, I found myself crying with relief. "It's over, Dad," she whispered. "It's finally over." I held my daughter and watched as the FBI agents hauled Austin to his feet. He looked smaller somehow, diminished. The man who had terrorized Grace for 18 months, who had tried to murder her and threatened to kill me, looked like nothing more than a pathetic coward. "Grace," he said, as they dragged him past us. "Grace, please, I'm sorry. I never meant for it to go this far." Grace looked at him with no emotion at all. "Yes, you did, Austin. You meant every bit of it. That's why you're going to prison for the rest of your life." As they led Austin away, Agent Martinez filled us in on what would happen next. Austin would be charged with attempted murder, domestic violence, embezzlement, kidnapping, and a dozen other felonies. The evidence Grace had collected was overwhelming. He'd likely spend the next 20 to 30 years in prison. "What about his company?" I asked. "Morrison and Associates is finished," Agent Martinez said. "We arrested Mr. Hendricks this morning for embezzlement. The company's assets are frozen while we sort out how much money was stolen from client accounts." Grace squeezed my hand. "The victims will get their money back, Dad. The FBI has been tracking the stolen funds. Austin and Hendricks kept detailed records of their crimes." 3 hours later, we were finally alone in Agent Martinez's office, giving our final statements. Grace looked exhausted, but relieved, like a weight had been lifted from her shoulders. "What happens now?" I asked her. "Now I get to start over," she said. "The FBI is helping me establish a new identity, just in case Austin has friends who might want revenge. But I'll be able to stay in contact with you, Dad. We'll just have to be careful for a while." "And after the trial?" Grace smiled, and it was the first genuine smile I'd seen from her in years. "After the trial, I'm free. Really free. Austin can't hurt me anymore, can't control me anymore. I can go back to school, get a new job, maybe even date someone who doesn't think hitting women is an acceptable hobby." 6 months later, I sat in a federal courthouse watching Austin Cooper get sentenced to 25 years in prison. Grace testified via video link to protect her new identity, and her words were devastating. She calmly recounted 18 months of abuse, the night Austin tried to strangle her, and how she'd been forced to fake her own death to escape him. Austin's lawyer tried to argue that Grace's elaborate deception somehow made her the real criminal, but the jury wasn't buying it. They'd seen the photos of her bruises, heard the recordings of Austin threatening her. watched the video of him hitting her. When the verdict came back guilty on all counts, Austin collapsed in his chair and had to be helped from the courtroom. Madison, his girlfriend, was in the gallery. She'd stuck by him through the trial, claiming he was innocent, that Grace had seduced him into a life of crime. But when the guilty verdict was read, I saw her face crumble. She finally understood what kind of man she'd been defending. After the sentencing, Grace and I met at a small cafe outside the city. She looked different again, healthier. Her hair was shorter and darker now, and she wore glasses she didn't need to help disguise her appearance, but her smile was the same. "How does it feel?" I asked her. "Free," she said without hesitation. "For the first time in 3 years, I feel completely free. Austin can't hurt me anymore. He can't hurt anyone anymore." "Do you ever regret it? The plan, I mean. Having to put me through thinking you were dead?" Grace reached across the table and took my hand. "Every day, Dad. That was the hardest part of the whole thing, knowing how much pain I was causing you. But it was the only way to make sure Austin couldn't wiggle out of the charges. We needed him to believe he'd committed the perfect crime. And Dr. Peterson? How is he?" "He's fine. The medical board cleared him of any wrongdoing since he was helping a domestic violence victim escape her abuser. He's actually started a program now to help other women in similar situations." We sat in comfortable silence for a while, watching people walk by on the street. Normal people with normal problems, not running from abusive husbands or faking their own deaths. "I have something for you," Grace said, pulling a small wrapped package from her purse. Inside was a photo in a simple frame. It showed Grace and me at her college graduation, both of us beaming at the camera. Before Austin, before the abuse, before everything went wrong. "I want you to remember me like that," she said. "Happy, free, the daughter you raised, not the victim I became." "You were never just a victim, Grace," I told her. "You were a survivor. You outsmarted a man who thought he was smarter than everyone else, and you made sure he paid for what he did. I've never been more proud of you." As we hugged goodbye, I knew it might be months before I saw her again. Grace's new life required distance, anonymity, safety measures that would keep Austin's reach from ever touching her again. But for the first time since that terrible night at the train station, I felt peace. My daughter was alive, Austin was in prison where he belonged, and justice had been served. Grace Morrison had died in that cemetery 2 years ago, but the woman who walked away from that cafe was someone new, someone stronger, someone who had taken control of her own story and written her own ending. And that woman was going to be just fine.